This man was arrested and went to jail for pretending to be a ghost. Unbelievable and unfortunate stories that will make you second-guess our legal system. Here are the top 10 people who went to jail for crazy reasons. Number 10. Reading shared email. Suspicions of infidelity aren't always valid, but one Leon Walker did, in fact, suspect his spouse of outside shenanigans, so he decided to investigate. He didn't hire a private eye, follow her around, or even confront her about his theory. All he had to do was open the couple's shared laptop and read his wife's emails. His fears were confirmed while reading the email exchanges. His wife was getting action on the side with her second husband. Leon shared the information with the father of Mrs. Walker's child out of a feeling of responsibility, and that's where the calamity began. After Ms. Walker found out her current husband had shared those affair-confirming emails with her son's father, she had him arrested, claiming malicious hacking as the charge, even though all Leon did was open up a jointly operated computer to see if his hunch was right. But maybe it wasn't that easy, and he actually did go all ninja hacking sleuth, snooping around and eventually finding the sticky note she stored all of her passwords on. There's a discussion to be had about whether Leon was ethically correct into looking into his spouse's private conversations, but when the matter involves an intimate relationship with effects on people other than husband and wife, maybe Leon was justified in his snooping. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Number 9. Predicting an earthquake. Seismology, despite all the technological advancements in the field and the several thousands of years it's been known to be an empirical study, is still inexact. That's why it's so surprising that 7 Italian researchers were sentenced to 6 years in prison each on the charge of manslaughter. The reason for their jailing was that they failed to accurately predict the location and scale of the L'Aquila earthquake in 2009 that killed over 200 people. Many much smaller earth tremors had rattled the area in the months before the quake, causing frightened people to wonder if they should evacuate. According to the researchers' memo, issued 1 week before the big quake, they concluded that it was improbable that there would be a major quake, so no formal evacuation order was put into effect. Worse still, after the memo was released, some of the researchers even gave reassuring interviews to local media to stress that the forthcoming earthquake was very unlikely and that even 6 months' worth of low-magnitude tremors was not enough evidence to suggest something worse was coming. During the trial, which began in September 2011, the defense had argued it is impossible to predict quakes. Seismologists have long concurred, saying the technology doesn't exist to predict a quake and that no major earthquake has ever been accurately predicted. That didn't stop these unfortunate seismologists from seeing the back of a jail cell. Number 8. Insulting an ailing soccer player. When Bolton Wanderers midfielder Fabrice Muamba collapsed of a heart attack mid-match in March 2012, 21-year-old student Liam Stacey took to Twitter to make fun of him over it in a particularly crass, stupid manner which we will not repeat here. It had to do with Fabrice Muamba's skin color as an African player. After droves of backlash, Stacey claimed that his account was hacked, that he was drunk, and that he was just messing around, all at various points in time in his own defense. In the end, he got what was coming to him. First, he was booted from Twitter, then suspended from his university, and finally sent to jail for 56 days. What I struggled to get my head around was the week or two before I was just a normal kid getting on with my work in university, getting on with life, playing rugby with all of my mates. Then a week or two later, I was just going to prison. Everything had been turned upside down, he later told the BBC. He was jailed for inciting racial hatred for his comments about the health and race of an individual, as well as engaging in derogatory comments online directly with people who opposed him. Number 7. Sending kids to the wrong school. Ohio mother Kelly Williams Bowler lived in a crappy school district but wanted her kids to get a good education. She lived part-time with her father, who was in a much better district, so she hatched a plan to send her daughters there instead, under the guise of them living at her father's home address. It's a fairly common tactic in the US, but if you're caught doing this, the punishment is far more severe than most people realize. Once discovered, Williams Bowler had to serve 10 days in jail for crime because the judge felt that some punishment or deterrent was needed for other individuals who might think to defraud the various school districts. Let this be a lesson if you're in a similar situation. Send your kids to the schools they live nearest to, no matter how much it sucks. Otherwise, You could end up with a criminal record. Number 6. Possession of a mysterious substance. It began innocently enough for Ashley Huff, a 23-year-old just riding in the passenger seat of a car when police in Gainesville, Georgia pulled the car over for a routine traffic stop. When cops searched Huff's bag, they found a spoon that was covered in a mysterious residue. It was dirty, Huff explained, because she had recently eaten SpaghettiOs and placed the dirty spoon in a bag in order to return it to a friend. Officers thought it might be methamphetamine, so they conducted a field test which reportedly came back positive. Huff was charged with possession of methamphetamine and spent 2 weeks behind bars before being released. Huff was later thrown back in jail in August, where she remained for a month and a half until more thorough lab results on her spoon came back. They revealed that she'd actually only been guilty of possession of SpaghettiOs sauce all along. It's unclear how the mix-up took 2 weeks to rectify, or how methamphetamine can be mistaken for pasta sauce. But you have to feel for Ashley Huff here, who was so unlucky that her lunch forced her into wrongfully serving jail time. Number 5. Scrutiny over homemade soap. Similar to what happened to the carb-loading Ashley Huff, 26-year-old Annadelle Cruz and 30-year-old Alexander Bernstein were booked and locked up on cocaine trafficking charges in Pennsylvania when police officers refused to believe that 2 bars of homemade soap in her car were not actually cocaine. It seems like a simple test to conduct to realize that cocaine, which is powdery, and soap, which is not powdery, couldn't be confused, but we suppose there's always room for error from police officers. After being pulled over in Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, troopers said they smelled marijuana in the car. Cruz admitted to having smoked earlier in the day, which raised officers' suspicion during the traffic stop. When officers found the soap in the car, they tested it and it came back positive. How exactly? We're not entirely sure. The pair spent the next month in jail, presumably unable to post bail, which was set at $500,000 for Bernstein and $250,000 for Cruz. The charges were eventually dropped after a state lab turned up no traces of illicit substances, despite the initial positive result. A lawyer for Cruz later condemned the police's actions and how the client was treated by being thrown in jail on an unreasonable bail fee. After this, everyone should pause about jumping to conclusions when a field test is said to be positive by law enforcement. There are people going to jail on high bail amounts based on these field tests. Number 4. Farting. In 2012, school districts in Meridian, Mississippi came under heavy scrutiny for overseeing what the Justice Department called a school-to-prison pipeline, in which students were regularly referred to juvenile detention centers for even the most minor infractions. In a letter unveiling the findings of a federal investigation, the Justice Department explained that some students had been incarcerated for things like dress code violations, flatulence, profanity, and disrespect. Yeah, flatulence. Farting for the less sophisticated among us. Farting was against the rules in some Meridian schools. And in 2008, a 13-year-old Florida student was arrested and hauled off to the police station after disrupting class by farting and turning off other kids' computers. He was charged with disruption of school function and later released into the care of his mother. Whatever happened to being sent to the principal's office? Flatulence also caused a Florida gym teacher to be forced onto administrative leave after farting in the general direction of a Pensacola High School junior student. Davis Allen Darden, 38, had been teaching at this school for nearly 15 years and deliberately denied passing gas on 16-year-old Graham Britton's face during a routine wrestling demonstration session. Number 3. Praising a higher power too loudly. Pastor Johnny Clark of Columbia, South Carolina was a repeat offender for God. If you live in or have visited a big city on a warm summer day, you'll be familiar with street preachers set up in crowded places, spreading their message to anyone within earshot of a megaphone. Pastor Clark was one of those very loud, persistent demonstrators. He was found guilty of unlawful sound amplification and sentenced to 2 weeks in jail for a irregular and rambunctious Pentecostal worship service that had brought police to his church more than 50 times. Neighbors had complained repeatedly that instruments played during the service were disruptive and that Clark was still using microphones and drums despite a previous injunction against them. The word of the Lord got him jail time and a criminal record. What would Jesus do? Number 2. Acting like a ghost. Anthony Stollard, a 24-year-old from Portsmouth, England, booted a soccer ball at gravestones and acted like a ghost for cemetery visitors one night after having a few too many drinks during a night on the town. The line for prosecution on this case was thin, but because his attorney said that his actions wouldn't have been inappropriate outside of a cemetery, but inside a cemetery while people are grieving for their loved ones it might be, criminal charges were leveled. He was throwing himself backwards, waving his arms and going, "Woo," said a prosecuting attorney. "I'm assuming he was pretending to be a ghost." Stoller pleaded guilty to using threatening or abusive words or behavior likely to cause distress, which came with a $125 fine, but no time other than what he spent in a drunk tank. Honorable Mention 1. Punishing your children. A Michigan mom said she was punishing her daughter when she took away her cell phone, a punishment she figured would get her point across, but the mom was wrong. It was her daughter who would have the last laugh. Jody May from Granville, Michigan stood before a district judge who saw her disciplinary action fit to be labeled as a crime. She was accused of stealing that phone and facing possible jail time for her theft. Maybe, she said, she was just doing what any mother does, punishing her daughter as a concerned parent, making sure her kid was being disciplined appropriately. May said she took the iPhone 6 from her 15-year-old daughter in April after the girl got in trouble in school. Her ex-husband, though, told police he owned the phone and claimed his ex-wife's punishment was a crime. He filed a complaint with the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office alleging his ex-wife stole the phone. That led to her arrest in May, although she was immediately released on a $200 bond. She faced a misdemeanor charge of larceny under $200, punishable by up to 93 days in jail. Just as her bench trial was to start Tuesday, before Ottawa County District Judge Judy Mulder, prosecutors added a second charge over the same alleged phone theft, larceny by conversion, also punishable by up to 93 days. Then, minutes later, before any witnesses were called, prosecutors approached the judge with a new story. It turns out that the ex-husband didn't own the phone after all, the daughter did. And because of that, the mom left the courtroom with a clean record. Honorable Mention 2. Yelling at trees in the nude. Dieter Braun, 43, from Recklinghausen, said the stress release technique had worked perfectly until he was arrested. It was his marriage guidance counselor who advised him to run around naked shouting at trees. He told police that venting his anger on the trees had stopped him from shouting at his wife. "If I didn't go into the woods and scream at the trees, then my marriage would probably be over," he said. He continued in his own defense that his strange habit was a type of relaxation therapy, that feeling the breeze on his naked skin did wonders for calming him down in high-stress situations. But local police said other visitors to the forest did not find his behavior relaxing and charged him with causing a public nuisance. Just so you know, I am wearing pants right now. Number 1. Public sex with an inanimate object. Who needs privacy? Apparently not Derek R. Peel, who deputies arrested for indecent exposure after a neighbor called and said Peel was having sex with an inanimate object in his driveway around 12:30 p.m. in broad daylight. He was charged with 4 counts of public indecency in Ohio's Fairfield County Municipal Court. This is not the first incident involving Peel and the neighbor. On February 20th, the neighbor called the sheriff's office and said Peel was having sex with a piece of furniture in public. The neighbor told deputies a similar incident occurred last summer. Peel was not arrested for the previous incidents, but was taken to jail for the final call that made police officers respond to a call that most would consider a waste of time. Deputies said the neighbor took a video of Peel allegedly performing a sex act in his driveway, which was proof enough to bring him up on indecent exposure charges. Deputies also said Peel admitted to performing the act and exposing himself. They said he saw nothing wrong with it because the driveway is on his property. Deputies disagreed and told Peel that since he was in public view, anyone could see him, therefore, it was indecent. In Ohio, where the incident took place, prohibited consensual sexual activity may include sexual intercourse or other sexual behavior performed in public. For instance, a couple having sex in a public park may be charged with public indecency or disorderly conduct, a misdemeanor. In Ohio, an individual commits an act of public indecency by exposing one's genitals, engaging in sexual conduct or masturbation in the presence of a minor, all of which are possible when having public sex in plain view on your driveway at lunchtime in a residential area. That's all we have for you today, folks, and thank you all for watching. Tell us in the comments below what you think the top 10 crazy arrest was, and if you like this video, please click like, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notifications bell so that you don't miss out on all our latest content.